Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, intercepting Houthi attacks on central Israel and Tel Aviv as the IDF takes out another top Hezbollah leader in Lebanon. Plus, waging the war of public opinion. Israeli leaders counter charges of genocide. And Benjamin Netanyahu speaks at the UN. Samaritan's Purse donating armored ambulances to frontline rescue workers. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the UN today. His speech comes while Israel's enemies continue their rocket attacks and many nations are calling for a ceasefire. Here's the latest. Air raid sirens rang out across Tel Aviv early today as the Houthis aimed a missile at Israel's high-tech center from Yemen. The Israeli military said its Arrow anti-missile system intercepted it. In Beirut, the IDF eliminated another top Hezbollah commander, this time the one who oversaw the terror group's drones and cruise missiles. Mohammed Swar was also at one point a top advisor to the Houthis in Yemen on how best to use their drones and missiles. That attack came as the White House is upset that Israel is rejecting an international call for a ceasefire, especially after the Americans say they believe top Israelis had already given tacit approval to that very public appeal.
We wouldn't have issued it when and how we did if it wasn't supported by the conversations that we are having with top Israeli officials yesterday, and those conversations continue today.
An Israeli government spokesman clarified Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's position.
Reports about a ceasefire being already agreed are not accurate. The Prime Minister's reiterated that, yes, of course, Israel is open to diplomacy, as we have been. It's always our go-to option.
After Netanyahu landed in the U.S. for a speech today at the UN, he again made clear why he wants to keep up the war on Hezbollah.
Our policy is clear. We're continuing to strike Hezbollah with full force, and we will not stop until we reach all our goals. Chief among them, the return of the residents of the north securely to their homes.
In his UN speech, Netanyahu is expected to argue that Israel's offensive attacks on Hezbollah and Hamas are a justified defense against those terror groups' war to wipe out Jews and the Jewish state. Netanyahu's address comes after Palestinian Authority leader Mahmoud Abbas made his case to the UN Thursday. Although he talked about establishing a Palestinian state alongside Israel, he also hinted at kicking the Jews out of what he called Palestine.
It will remain ours, and if anyone were to leave, it would be the occupying usurpers.
Abbas also claimed the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, the holiest site in Judaism, is, quote, exclusive property of Muslims. On Thursday night, nearly 50,000 Jews gathered next to the Temple Mount to pray for the swift return of the hostages, the safety of the soldiers, and for the security and unity of the people of Israel. Despite all its efforts to spare civilian lives, Israel has been charged with committing genocide so many times during the Gaza war, it's become almost commonplace. Now, Lebanon's prime minister is labeling Israel's attacks in Lebanon a genocide in every sense of the word. Paul Strand looks at whether that could be true.
The actual words coming from Israeli leaders aren't at all about committing genocide. They're about saving Lebanese lives.
I have a message for the people of Lebanon. Israel's war is not with you. It's with Hezbollah. For too long, Hezbollah has been using you as human shields. It placed rockets in your living rooms and missiles in your garage. Those rockets and missiles are aimed directly at our cities, directly at our citizens. To defend our people against Hezbollah strikes, we must take out those weapons. Now, starting this morning, the IDF has warned you to get out of harm's way. I urge you, take this warning seriously.
The Hezbollah terrorist organization has been continuously launching attacks on Israeli civilians and has no plans to stop. This is southern Lebanon. There are dozens of Lebanese villages situated along approximately 80 kilometers of the border with Israel. For over 20 years, Hezbollah has deployed its arms inside homes and militarized civilian infrastructure. As a result, the Hezbollah terrorist organization has turned southern Lebanon into a battlefield.
Want proof? Watch after this IDF hit all the Hezbollah rockets and ammo blowing up as secondary explosions right in the middle of these civilian apartment buildings in Lebanon.
We ask residents of Lebanese villages to pay attention to the message and warning published by the IDF and heed them. This is an advance warning for your own safety and the safety of your family.
Israeli President Isaac Herzog went on Britain's Sky News recently to blast the Brits for cutting weapons shipments to Israel because of its supposed genocide in Gaza. He argued the fighting Israel is doing is not to commit genocide against anyone, but to preserve all Western civilization.
I believe our friends should understand that we are fighting the war, their war too, in the long term. You have to understand that there is an empire of evil which really thinks and believes as part of an ideology in the jihadist ideology, in conquering the Middle East and moving on into Europe and the rest of the world. They call you Satans. They want to plant bomb in your cities all over the world. Hezbollah has terror cells situated in countries all over the world.
Paul Strand, CBN News, Jerusalem.
In recent weeks, Benjamin Netanyahu has been clear regarding Israel's goals in southern Lebanon: eliminate Hezbollah and its weapons and ensure the 60,000 displaced Israelis can return to their homes in the north. He arrived in New York this week to make Israel's case before the world at the UN. Here's an excerpt.
In the last year, completely unprovoked, a day after the Hamas massacre on October 7th, Hezbollah began attacks against Israel, which forced more than 60,000 Israelis on our northern border to leave their homes, becoming refugees in their own land. Hezbollah turned vibrant towns in the north of Israel into ghost towns. So I want you to think about this in equivalent American terms. Just imagine if terrorists turned El Paso and San Diego into ghost towns. Then ask yourself, how long would the American government tolerate that? A day? A week? A month? I doubt they tolerate it even for a single day. Yet Israel has been tolerating this intolerable situation for nearly a year. Well, I've come here today to say, enough is enough. We won't rest until our citizens can return safely to their homes. We will not accept a terror army perched on our northern border, able to perpetrate another October 7th-style massacre. For 18 years, Hezbollah brazenly refused to implement UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which requires it to move its forces away from our borders. Instead, Hezbollah moved right up to our border. They secretly dug terror tunnels to infiltrate our communities and indiscriminately fired thousands of rockets into our towns and villages. They fire these rockets and missiles not from military sites, not from that. They do that too. But they fire those rockets and missiles after they place them in schools, in hospitals, in apartment buildings, and in the private homes of the citizens of Lebanon. They endanger their own people. They put a missile in every kitchen, a rocket in every garage. I said to the people of Lebanon this week, get out of the death trap that Hezbollah has put you in. Don't let Nasrallah drag Lebanon into the abyss. We're not at war with you. We're at war with Hezbollah, which has hijacked your country and threatens to destroy ours.
Coming up, political analysis on the mounting pressure for a ceasefire as Israel makes progress fighting Hezbollah. Welcome back to Jerusalem Dateline. I'm joined here in our studio with John Wagi, CBN senior editor. John, now they're calling for a ceasefire, but this battle's been going on for 11 months. Why now?
Yeah, great point you make, Chris. It was all about Gaza for the first, since October 7th. It was all about Gaza, and rocket after rocket was coming into the north. The 60,000 or more citizens of the north had to evacuate almost immediately after October 7th. Never a peep on the diplomatic front about what was happening in Lebanon. It was always about getting the hostages released and Israel stopping the fire in Gaza and ending the war against Hamas. That was what it was all about. And it's just flipped. And, you know, a lot of expressions that, you know, Hamas is the JV team and Hezbollah is the pros.
Sure.
Well, now they're up against the pros and they're calling for the same thing. And of all the ironies, Resolution 1701, after 18 years in hibernation, comes back to the forefront, and now it's supposed to be implemented, when 1701, that UN resolution, calls for all non-Lebanese army troops to be out of that region of southern Lebanon. It was never enforced, and they were able to build up from 50 or 60 or 80,000 rockets to 150,000. That's what happened in the intervening 18 years. So why now with Resolution 1701?
Yeah. So now we have Israel really on the offensive right now, on the verge of an invasion, and now we have Benjamin Netanyahu at the United Nations. Will they implement is there a political solution right now without going into on the boots on the ground in Lebanon?
I think that's what Israel has come to the realization, that once they're in this, and it's been very costly for the entire nation economically and all of that, you have to take it to its conclusion, which is, and the goals, remember the goals, eliminate the threat of Hamas, eliminate the threat of Hezbollah on the northern border, and now you have the official policy of returning the 60,000 Israeli residents to their homes in the north. You can't do that if you're negotiating these truces, keeping Hezbollah in place, and then allowing Iran to restock, resupply, and make the weapons even more dangerous over the intervening or the coming years. You can't do that. And I think most Israelis realize that, and it's Washington who doesn't really realize it, or if they don't realize it, they're looking at another agenda that they want enforced.
Yeah, I was talking to an Israeli friend of mine last night. He was saying, he said they have to go in to eliminate Hamas. Now, another thing that happened, a lot of people don't realize is, just before the election 2 years ago, there was a deal, a gas deal by the former government with Hezbollah. What happened there?
Amazing how quickly we forget these things. Yeah, 2 years ago, the Hezbollah had basically threatened that if Israel didn't conclude a gas deal with them, they were going to war with Israel. Those were the terms. So what happened was the Biden administration immediately began to negotiate a gas deal that was supposed to give some benefits to Israel, some to Lebanon, to Hezbollah basically, and it ended up being 100% in favor of Hezbollah, 0% in favor of Israel, and they concluded the deal and everybody celebrated it. 2 years later, we're on the verge of a pretty major war. What was that all about? Why? Why these policies coming from Washington, coming from Europe, coming from the UN? Why? When the peacekeepers in Lebanon for 18 years didn't enforce the peace.
Yeah. John, we have 1 minute left. We have a long history with Lebanon. We've been into southern Lebanon many times,
right,
through the good fence. Talk about how special this land is, not only to many people like you and me, but to the Lord himself.
Right. The scripture says Lebanon will become a fruitful field, and that's what we all want to see. I know our hearts were heavy when we came out in 1999 and prayed at the Good Fence for better times, and we haven't reached those better times yet, but Lebanon has a bright future. And the Lord has big plans for all of this region, especially Israel, but all the surrounding nations. And that's what we need to be praying for now. And I don't think that these agreements that are being thrown up, frankly, to correspond with certain election goals at the end of this year are going to be helpful.
Yeah, great point, John, and great motivation to be praying for Lebanon.
Amen.
Thank you. Up next, new UN resolutions calling for Jews to leave the old city of Jerusalem, plus Judea and Samaria. Imagine a world in which Jewish people are not allowed in Jerusalem's old city or in biblical Judea or Samaria. Those are among the directives listed in a recent UN resolution. Israeli legal scholar Eugene Kontorovich stopped by our studios to break it down. Take a look. Eugene Kontorovich, thanks for joining us again. The UN General Assembly just passed a resolution really trying to get Jews out of the old city and Judea and Samaria. What's your reaction to this resolution?
It's just another in a long history of blatantly anti-Semitic, anti-Israel resolutions by the United Nations. There's really nothing new here. I can say 1975, the year I was born, the United Nations voted that the very idea of the Jewish state is racist, colonialist, and bad. So there's nothing new here, but it's a tactic to increase diplomatic pressure on Israel. And the idea is that in a year, when Jews are still living in Judea and Samaria, Israel has no intention of removing them, it creates another window to beat up on Israel, and they're hoping there's going to be an administration in the White House that's ready to take stronger measures and to use this non-binding, legally irrelevant resolution as a cover, as an excuse. And I gotta say, you know, the United Nations is supposed to stand for human rights, decency. Is there any other situation in the world where the United Nations passes a resolution saying a group of people is not allowed to live in an area? And that's what they're doing. They're putting a no Jews sign on parts of the biblical Holy Land. And that's extraordinary and it's shocking, and I think it, you know, is yet another piece of evidence that it's time to revisit our relationship with the United Nations. I think it's also another piece of evidence that Hamas is being rewarded diplomatically for October 7th. The amount of diplomatic wins they have scored, even as they lose the war, since October 7th is extraordinary. They've gotten ICC investigations, ICJ cases, recognition of their state by many countries, these moves at the United Nations. All of this is teaching Islamic terrorists a lesson. You want the world on your side? Kill Jews.
Is it unique that there was actually a time limit? They're saying in 12 months, or is that just a window to?
It's a bit of it's like a gimmick, right? It's designed to so that like at the end of that they can say, look, time's up. Nothing actually happens, right? It's a non-binding resolution, but it's designed to create an atmosphere of pressure.
Right. Eugene Kontorovich, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Still ahead, committed to standing with Israel, Samaritan's Purse donating armored vehicles to Israel's emergency rescue workers. Franklin Graham, the president of the humanitarian group Samaritan's Purse, came recently to Israel to dedicate 2 new armored ambulances and a center to Israel's emergency service system, Magen David Adom, or MDA. Speaking at Av Shalom near the Gaza border, he said he believes it will help restore what Hamas destroyed on October 7th. Almost 1 year after the Hamas terror attacks on October 7th, Graham told CBN News the ambulances will save lives.
I've saw some of the ones after October 7th that were destroyed, shot up with the blood-stained seats. And they weren't armored. These are armored, and hopefully it will save the life next time there's something like this happens. So very important that we're very close to Gaza here, just a couple of kilometers. This whole area was overrun by the terrorists, so maybe this will help save life.
On October 7th, Hamas targeted ambulances so they could not save lives. This ambulance is dedicated to Israeli-American Hirsch Goldberg Poland, one of the most well-known hostages, who was tragically murdered recently by Hamas in an underground tunnel nearby in the Gaza Strip. The other ambulance was dedicated to the memory of Israeli-Americans Roy Adan and Smadar Moradon, murdered in their home in front of their children on October 7th. Graham made a surprise announcement when he said Samaritan's Purse will provide Magen David Adom with an additional 20 armored ambulances. In January, he dedicated 14 ambulances for a total of 42 ambulances to the MDA. Graham also helped lay the cornerstone for a new Magen David Adom station in Av Shalom. It's designed to increase the speed paramedics and EMTs can reach emergencies along the Gaza border.
This is both a historical day and emotional day for Magen David Adom. It's historical because we are strengthening the resilience of Magen David Adom, directly strengthening the resilience of the people of Israel by dedicating a new station or groundbreaking for a new station and those bulletproof ambulances. And this is so important, especially in the events that are happening in Israel during the last year.
Shacham says the help from Samaritan's Purse comes at an important time for Israel.
And it's emotional because you see people coming from all around the world and supporting the people of Israel. Sometimes as Israelis, we feel that we are all alone in this world, that at the darkest time, all you have is your family and maybe your friends. And it's emotional because seeing Samaritan Purse coming for the third time in 11 months.
At October 7th, the Hamas terrorists shot at our ambulances, killed team members, wounded our team members. We deployed bulletproof ambulances that were stationed in Judea and Samaria down south in order to save lives. And these ambulances, a new, brand new bulletproof ambulance, is here to secure the life of Israelis and give resilience, hope, and give us the tool and the mean to better protect the people who live here or anywhere else in the country.
MDA International spokesman Yonatan Yagodovsky says the support of Christians for such a time as this is invaluable.
Sure that I can actually describe it in words. It's in our heart and in their heart. The care of Israel, the care for the well-being of the Israelis, giving us, Magen David Adom, the ability to reach out a helping hand to anyone in need, in any place in Israel, is phenomenal. We know that there are people who care about Israel, deeply, deeply care and love Israel, and care about the people of Israel. It's people to people, it's heart to heart.
Graham came with a message to the Israeli people.
The world in which we are living is very, very dangerous. I believe it's going to get worse, not better. But our hope is in God. The psalmist said, some put their faith in chariots and horses, but the writer said, I put my faith in the Word of God. And that's where we need to put our faith and trust it.
He says it's a critical time to stand with the Jewish people.
These are God's people. Of all the nations of the earth, God chose the Jewish people. Why? We'll ask him when we get to heaven one day, but this is his people. And I think it's so important that we stand with them and love them and care for them. And this is a small thing that we can do.
What a wonderful ministry and such a wonderful gift. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on social media and CBN apps. And be sure to sign up for our email blasts so you can get information on breaking news. And please continue to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, for the safety of IDF soldiers and all those caught in harm's way, and for the return of all the hostages. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.